Football at Forward, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com, Inside the Birds on YouTube, and of course, Inside the Birds on Patreon for all of your Eagles coverage for Super Bowl 59. It's, of course, Geoff Mosher, Adam Kaplan, Andrew Checo, all part of the Inside the Birds team. They join us each and every day here on the Sports Bash. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. And joining us now, as he does each and every Wednesday, it is Geoff Mosher. Of course, they are down at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama. But as you know, Jeff, Philadelphia Eagle fans, it is 24/7 Super Bowl 59 talk. How you doing, my friend?
I'm great. It is, well, I don't want to make you jealous or any of our listeners, Josh, but it's pretty warm down here today. It's about 70 degrees. I'm looking at palm trees right now as we speak. I don't know how many people know, but Mobile, Alabama is southern Alabama. It's coastal Alabama. So you get that sort of Florida panhandle appeal.
Nice. Well, while you enjoy the scenic views, I'm going to ask you about the Eagles. So let's start with this, because a lot of the national media people, we'll call them, I'm trying to be nice about it, they are trying to find storylines. And as you know, Jeff, one of these storylines for the entire year has been the JalenHurts, Nick Sirianni relationship. And now there are people who are trying to latch on to the JalenHurts straitjacket comment from Sunday's postgame. And even though all kinds of former players are saying Hurts said it in jest, the media is trying to fabricate this negative relationship between Sirianni and Hurts. Even though Sirianni says he thinks Hurts meant it in jest, people still keep bringing it up. So, Jeff, what is your reaction to this seemingly another, here we go again, Sirianni, Jalen Hurts conversation?
Yeah, that's a good question, Josh. I think most people who listen to your station, who listen to Inside the Birds, know that Adam and I focus very little on angles like that. We keep it football and X's and O's, unless we think that there's something going on in the locker room that's causing tension or division that doesn't have to do with X's and O's. So my reaction to that, and I think this has happened all year long, more so this year than other years, I think there's a real disconnect between the way the national media is viewing the Eagles and talking about the Eagles and the way the Eagles are viewing themselves and talking within the locker room about themselves, and even the way the local media has viewed the Eagles. Because sometimes I'll see these TV shows and see what they're talking about, and I'll say to myself, where are they getting this from? And I do think that there's sort of this big network war going on where talking heads from one big network is trying to respond to what the other network is saying and vice versa. And they're intentionally looking at salacious angles or misleading angles to fuel that narrative. So I really don't have much of a reaction on that, what was said, other than I think that there's no issue with it. And I think Jalen was making a comment in jest. But my reaction is more like, man, is the big network media getting a little out of control with their narratives?
It has been suggested by former players, whether of the Eagles, like Jason Kelsey, or national guys like Jeff Saturday. There's a lot of former players I've heard. I've even heard Jason Avant mention this as well, that a lot of the anti-Eagles sentiment has been fabricated by people who don't regularly cover the team. Is that a very fair assessment?
Oh, man, that might be above my pay grade on that one. Only because I know this sounds ridiculous, Josh, and you know me well, so you might believe this more than other people, but I watch very little TV. I watch almost zero, I won't say letters, I'll just say big networks. I watch very little of that talking head stuff, so I don't know what everybody's saying. The reason why I did say that I thought that there was a disconnect is because people have asked me questions about what so-and-so from this show said about the Eagles and that said about the Eagles. And I have seen occasional clips on social media of stuff that's going on. But I don't know why there would be an anti-Eagles sentiment because the team is a fairly likable team.
Well, if they're a fairly likable team, one of the likable characters on the team, Geoff, would be Saquon Barkley. And it seems like there is a growing sentiment of the people who, as we know, nobody likes the evil empire, right? The Kansas City Chiefs, who the Eagles will face for the second time in the Super Bowl. But everyone seems to love the Saquon Barkley story. So I know for the Eagles, literally on the field, he has had an impact. But have we not talked enough, Geoff, about the impact Saquon Barkley has maybe had in the perception of this team, in terms of his impact in the locker room, his mindset? You know, I know there's more to championship teams than just what happens on the field.
You know, Josh, I'm going to spin that, actually. I do think we've talked a lot about the impact that Saquon Barkley has had on the team. We've talked a lot about how he's become an MVP candidate, whether he wins it or not. He has certainly had an MVP in the truest sense, like impact on the team. And I think most people knew that he was a locker room guy. He was a good dude. He was going to come in here and fit in and play for his teammates. But I'll tell you this. I think what's maybe changed a little bit, or what we've come to find out about Saquon, is that he's a tougher, more powerful runner than I think anybody ever saw in New York. He had a reputation for, even though he was a great athlete and could put up big numbers, was that he was probably going to go down on first hit, didn't have the best contact balance. And he has changed that. He has come here, and yes, he gets like 5 or 6, free yards before contact a lot of time, but you've seen him finish runs, run powerfully, spin out of tackles. Of course, the reverse hurdle. But in general, I think you've seen him run with more power and physicality. And so to your question about how that has translated from him coming to Philadelphia, think about how imposing the offensive line is. Think about Jalen Carter and Zach Bond. Think about TJ Gardner coming through with some big fourth down hits this year, right? I think there's an infectious physicality about this team, both offensively and defensively, to the point where a player like Saquon can come in here, have a reputation for being a finesse guy, but turn himself into a guy who also plays with good power for his position.
Talking with Geoff Mosher from Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com, at Geoff P. Mosher on the Twitter X platform, joining us here on a Wednesday edition of Football at 4 on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on a Wednesday. Geoff, if we've learned anything from this conversation that we have had, is that perception does not always equal reality. So for you, is there a narrative or storyline about this matchup between the Eagles and Chiefs round 2 that you think is either not being talked about enough or is being overhyped?
So there's one thing that sticks out, and we talked about this on the podcast, the Inside the Birds podcast that dropped this morning. It was with Adam and myself. I hear a lot of people looking at this matchup, and, we get emails and YouTube comments about it, saying that the Eagles are a far better team than they were 2 years ago because look how good they are defensively. And then also you add Saquon Barkley to the mix, whereas the Chiefs are kind of, yes, they've had turnover, but they're really not the same. And therefore maybe the Eagles should be the advantaged team going into it. But I would say that I don't think that's very fair. I think people forget that, the receivers for the Chiefs in that last Super Bowl were guys like Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, Juju Smith-Schuster was relied on a bigger role, MVS. This team now, they have a little bit more weaponry. I mean, obviously they have a lot of speed with the Xavier Worthy, the rookie, right? And they're getting Hollywood Brown integrated in after missing most of the year, all right? And who am I missing? Oh, they obviously have DeAndre Hopkins, who's still a pretty good receiver in this league. And obviously this is Pacheco, his third year. He doesn't look the same coming back from that injury, but he's still a power runner. And obviously the defense is very, very good. So I don't think this is a case where it's a remade, stronger, better, rebuilt Eagles team coming in against the same old Chiefs team. I don't think that's a correct narrative.
Is it more correct then to say that you mentioned all the upgrades, I'll call them, that the Chiefs have in their offensive weaponry? Are the Eagles better equipped to deal with those upgrades than maybe some other teams?
I would like to say yes. Certainly better equipped than maybe when they played them 2 years ago and weren't as dynamic on the back end. But I imagine that teams like the Ravens and the Bills all thought going into this year too that they had done a better job of building a good enough roster to beat the Chiefs, and they didn't.
So if teams think they built good enough, what then is the real neutralizing factor, aside from the obvious, Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, because it's not like these guys are immortal, okay? I mean, the Eagles almost beat these guys a couple of years ago. We saw that. Listen, you could argue that if the Ravens last year's AFC Championship don't basically fall on their face, they could have beaten the Chiefs. So it's not like this team is immortal. So is there a flaw? Is there something that the Eagles can take advantage of here?
I would say their most fundamental flaw, Josh, is that they're playing a left guard, a left tackle. All right, they're playing Joe Thuney, who's a very, very good left guard, and they're playing him a left tackle because they had injuries there and really nowhere to go. All their backups were failing to do the job, and I would say Thuney's held his own for a guy making that transition. So you go up against Josh Sweat and the Eagles defensive line, and I'm sure that there'll be some times that the Eagles figure out a way to get pressure. But this is something that Mahomes has been dealing with for quite a bit, and they haven't lost. So, to me, the neutralizer you're asking about is turnovers. Can the Eagles create turnovers the way they have so far throughout the playoffs with 9, I believe? I don't know if they can do that because the Chiefs very rarely turn the ball over. But if you win the turnover battle, if you can get 2, I think you give yourself a really good chance to win.
Geoff, on the other side of the ball, I know a lot of people have been focused on the Mahomes aspect, the Andy Reid aspect, but Steve Spagnuolo is putting together an insane career, especially in the postseason. And now, he has to face the Eagles again. Obviously, different coordinator this time. First time was Shane Steichen. This time is Kellen Moore. Shane Steichen did get points on the Chiefs defense 2 years ago. So what can the Eagles do in Super Bowl 59 to get 30-plus points again on the Chiefs and Steve Spagnuolo?
Yeah, it feels like that team from 2 years ago was a far more explosive passing offense. This will be a more explosive rushing offense. And I don't think that Kellen Moore has to sit here and create or design, or Jeff Stoutland for that matter, the most ingenious running play to get Saquon Barkley an explosive run. I think that they can naturally happen no matter how good the Chiefs defense is. I do think it'll help them if they can come up with a game plan like they just did against Washington, where they can get the ball out of JalenHurts' hand quickly, get Dallas Goedert involved early, across the middle, RPOs, be creative like you saw them against the Commanders. But I'm not really thinking that you're going to see a repeat of 2 years ago where the ball's in the air 30, 40, 50 yards and all these touchdowns. I'm kind of thinking this might be a lower scoring game than the one 2 years ago.
Is that mostly because you think Saquon's going to have a larger impact in this game?
Doesn't he have to?
Well, does he have to? I mean, I'm asking.
I mean, you tell me. How have the Eagles won games this year?
Well, you could argue that they've won in a variety of ways, but in every one of them, Saquon has had an impact.
I mean, listen, the numbers speak for themselves. The rushing touchdowns speak for themselves. I think Saquon has to be a big, big part of the game plan. I think it foundationally has to begin with Saquon, and then things work off there. Washington goes down the field. They put an 18-play drive on the board. They only get a field goal out of it, but they had to feel good about going 18 plays against this Eagles defense. The Eagles hand the ball off to Saquon once, and then all of a sudden they're up 7-3. You get what I'm saying here?
No, I totally hear what you're saying. My thing is that I know no one has stopped him this year, right? There's there hasn't been a team the entire year that has been like, we're going to shut down Saquon and been like overtly successful outside of Washington in the second half when there was no Hurts on the field. But to me, I'm just wondering, are the Chiefs equipped to handle the Eagles if they come at them multidimensionally? Because I know Kansas City's got some good tacklers and they got some good defenders.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're asking me, are the Chiefs equipped if the Eagles switch it up and try to come out passing and put the ball in the air? But I don't think that's really philosophically the right turn the Eagles are going to suddenly make going into the Super Bowl, right? Because if they do that and it doesn't work well, they are going to kick themselves, right? They're like, how did we not give the ball to our best player because we tried to get cute?
Geoff, before I let you go, I got to ask you the question that I've heard different Eagle fans ask me, which is, are you concerned about Jake Elliott going into Super Bowl 59?
Absolutely. And I don't care that it's indoors because he's not missing because of wind or elements. He's been missing right. He's been missing left. I think the big question, Josh, would be if it's tie game, 45 seconds left, Eagles are staring down a 50-yard, 5-yard field goal, 4th and 6. What's Nick Sirianni going to do?
It's a great question because if you're the Eagles, Geoff, you have a guy who has shown you in his career to do it, but he hasn't done it recently. And frankly, I don't know about you, but Harrison Butker looks perfectly fine after having surgery 3 months ago.
Exactly. Sometimes kickers go through this, and you just never know if it's coming back or not.
Well, we got tons of different angles that will be broken down for Super Bowl 59, and they will be doing it on the Inside the Birds podcast at InsideTheBirds.com, Inside the Birds on YouTube, and of course, don't forget the Inside the Birds Patreon page. He's Geoff Mosher at Geoff P. Mosher on the Twitter X platform, joining us here on 97.3 ESPN. Geoff, and continue to enjoy the palm trees down there in Mobile.
I will, man. Thanks for having me. Talk to you soon.